KZ's finally made an IEM with switches. Now all I gotta do is find that lost pin. Great. Hello and thank you for clicking on this video where I'll be sharing my experience on KZ's attempt at multiple switches on an IEM, the KZ-FI. Before we begin, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank KZ for sending this unit in exchange for my honest feedback. However, as always, they will have no influence over my feedback and all thoughts and opinions are my own. If you haven't been checking out any of my other KZ videos, do have a look because the unboxing experience is pretty much the same. You've got the cable, the IEMs themselves, and this time they gave you different sets of interchangeable ear tips, which is a nice way of changing it up. The cable is standard KZ cable, which I've talked about in many other videos, so I won't be repeating myself here. Oh, it does come with this pin, which is essentially a SIM card pin for the switches, so if you do lose this, you can get one of your SIM card pins as replacement. Otherwise, it's going to be really difficult to toggle your switches. The design of the IEM themselves are relatively plain and simple. You've got the metal shells and it's just a simple groove in the middle and it's a fingerprint magnet, and some of you may be thinking, this IEM looks quite familiar. And if you've owned the Joy Audio Shine, which is an IEM I have talked about in another video as well, it has the same but different vibe to it, especially when both switch faceplates look identical. As with all other KZ IEMs before the D-Fi, the gentle grooves on the shell and the relatively small size makes for a very comfortable fit for me personally, so no issues to highlight here. For the sound, unfortunately there were no instructions provided in the box, so I had to look their promotional materials on Facebook or their own website or even other people's graph to get some information, but I wish that kind of information was made readily available in the manual or something. But essentially, to sum it all up, switch 1, 2 and 3 are basically bass switches. Switch 4, according to KZ's website, brings the whole frequency up by 4 decibels, which for me is like switching from low to high gain and everything is just louder. So for me personally, switch 3 is the one I normally play around with and I'll leave the rest off. So let's talk about the sound based on that. For bass, when all the switches are down, bass sounds informative, and I mean that you can hear it but you don't necessarily feel it. It's there to accompany the track but not keep you engaged. Now you can increase the level of bass based on that switch, but of course I like my bass, so I went straight to 3 to test it out, and the bass had a little bit more texture to it. There's a bit more reverberation to the bass note now. It's a little weightier and it hits a little harder than when all the switches are down, but while it is more engaging than the bass setting, I feel like it's still missing that little bit of oomph. So definitely not a set to satisfy bass hits, but that's to the benefit of what I'm about to describe after this. For mid-range, the overall sound presentation is forward, so it works in a way where no matter what setting you have on your bass, it won't interfere with the vocals too much. But of course, the less bass you have, the clearer the sounds in the mid-range will come through. But even at the highest setting, I feel I'm getting that overall vocal and instrument on the same plane presentation, but I still hear the vocals front and center. For treble, there is plenty of treble here, which can be a little sharp if you're sensitive to treble, but I feel there's a bit of roll off at the treble extension because the air instruments sounded a little bit muffled or a little far away. So it works in a way where if you want the details to come through a little bit more, you can set the bass setting according to your preference. However, I personally push the highest bass just to balance out that treble, but unfortunately it still doesn't improve on the clarity of air instruments. For imaging, separation and detail clarity, it simply depends on which bass switch you toggle. When everything is off, I can hear imaging of sounds and details a little bit better, but it's still pretty average as a whole. However, when the highest bass setting is turned on, the details sound a little blended together and they can get a little lost on busier tracks. For power, I'm getting to about 10 o'clock on the dial on my Hi-Fi-Man EF400, which is pretty standard. So to sum it all up, I was initially concerned this was pretty much going to be a clone of the Joy Audio Shine. Unfortunately, the Shine still has its place in the lineup because the KZ-D-Fi is a much simpler yet competent IEM at this price point with the benefit of options to suit the general masses. I think KZ should take a pause on releasing so many IEMs at once because all these IEMs deserve some limelight, but they often get overshadowed by the next new KZ IEM, which is a shame because I feel a few of them, namely the PR2, ZVX, deserves a little bit more credit. However, personally, comparing this with the ZVX, for my sound preference, I honestly prefer the ZVX, but this is based on one man's opinion opinions, and I'm curious to know your thoughts. Did you enjoy the D-Fi, or by the time this video is released, there's probably already another new KZ IEM that you enjoy? Comment below, let me know, and with that all said, thank you to KZ once again for this opportunity, and thank you all very much for watching. Till the next experience, take care.